My name is Gergely Katona, and I'm a researcher at the HUN-REN Research Center for Natural Sciences. And it is my honor to have these esteemed panelists with me here. I don't know. We haven't discussed the sitting order. Okay. So let me introduce the panelists. Ulrike Busshoff, coordinator of the ERANET NEURON funding platform, and she's also the coordinator of the coordinating and support action for the young planning brain health. Philippe Amouyel, representing the EU joint program on neurodegenerative research, and Philippe Vernier, chief executive officer of EBRAINS, European Digital Research Infrastructure, and Frédéric Destrebecq, director of the European Brain Council, an organization dedicated to harmonizing efforts across Europe for brain research. And to begin with, let me ask you to introduce yourself and especially the organizations you are representing.
Thank you. So good morning. My name is Ulrike Busshoff. I'm the head of the Department of International Health Research at DLR Project Management Agency, which is in Germany. And we are the agency which is running the health research program for the German government. And in that role, we are also delegated to participate in European networks on behalf of the ministry. And that's the role I'm sitting here now, is for the ERANET NEURON, which is a network of funding agencies and ministries all over Europe, Australia, Asia, North America, not Africa. And the idea why I'm sitting here is to tell you about the success story. So we were talking about puzzles in the ecosystem. This is, if we talk about what is the future and where we want to go, it's best first to look back and to see what we constructed so far. And this is one of the success stories in the field, because it's a story which started over 20 years ago with a coalition of a willing of 4 countries. And now we are there with over 30 countries participating in a network. And if you look at the news, the evening news, you know how difficult it is to build a consensus on what to do together. And if you look at this network, there is a consensus of doing research calls together over 20 years and to agree on topics where to fund and put money together on the table to enable researchers and consortia to be built and research to be executed all over Europe and beyond in transnational consortia. So the success story here is that you see a public investment of these ministries and agencies of over 200 million euros in the past years. And that means that almost 1,000 research groups have been funded in this kind of funding scheme. And this is biomedical calls, 16 biomedical calls in these years. And even beyond that, there are calls on ethical and legal and social aspects in neuroscience, where we can see what are the consequences of what we're doing for society and beyond. So this is one of the success stories. We would like to, the learnings from this networks, to take that in the planning for the future.
Frédéric?
So good morning, my name is Frédéric Destrebecq. As introduced, I'm the Executive Director of the European Brain Council. So we are a Brussels-based non-profit organization representing patient federations, F9 Gamian, who will be speaking later on, as well as the clinical, professional and scientific societies in the brain space, the industry sector, as well as a network of national brain councils, all working together to promote brain research, brain innovation, and brain health at the European level. So we have as a key stakeholder in historically DG Research, asking them for a surge in funding in brain science. So EBC exists for a bit more than 20 years now, and the genesis of the organization was really to basically catch up on other fields of life science like cardiovascular, cancer, diabetes, and others, whilst neuroscience was completely lagging behind. So we can see that this work has really been achieved with efforts on demonstrating the societal impact of brain disorders, the benefit of investment into science, but also on generating the consensus between all the key stakeholders represented in the organizations on what the priorities in brain science should be. And now we are coming maybe at a new era, and I'll be speaking about the effort we have done in overcoming fragmentation and duplication in the context of EBRA.
So I'm Philippe Vernier, so the CEO of EBRAINS. EBRAINS is a research infrastructure, which is one of the main outcomes of the Human Brain Project. It was designed to put together tools and to become, the world-leading infrastructure in neuroscience. The tools which are available through EBRAINS are mostly brain atlases, which allows to classify data according to the 3D organization of the brain, because the brain is the function of the brain strongly depends on this 3D organization, and it gives also access to a unique sets of data that can be reused in many different fashions. And one of the fashion to use them is to use simulation tools for the brain, modeling tools at different scales, because also, yes, we need to understand the brain from the molecular level to the holistic level of functioning, and this is also now more and more possible through the tools which have been developed not only through the Human Brain Project, but other projects which can gather now inside eBrains. And also eBrains is, so it's a distributed infrastructure in 11 countries, which provide the tools through a smooth and intuitive tools to integrate all these services. This is also very important because you can always develop your own tools on your side, but the way to be able to put them together, to gather them with the data, to use them through the data is not so easy to do, and it's what eBrains is trying to provide more and more. And also it's a really a user-based infrastructure. It has been co-designed by the users. This is also important. It's really to fulfill the needs of the neuroscientists, and also now more and more in the field of medicine. Even if the Human Brain Project originally was mostly devoted to understanding the brain as a whole, it turns out that understanding the brain without dealing with the disease is not really possible. And now eBrains is working hard to integrate all the data which can come from cohorts and another kind of approach for diseases. And I think we will speak more about this kind of the challenge that eBrains could help to fulfill. Hand over to Philippe.
Thank you, Philippe. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Philippe Amouyel. I'm PhD. I'm professor of public health, still running a big research unit at HUN-REN University. And now 15 years ago, I went on a project which was, how can we defragment research in Europe? I'm in the field of neurodegenerative disease, specialized in Alzheimer's disease. As a scientist and a physician, what I say usually, and we have good example in HIV and cancer, that the condition of success in research relies on three things. The first one is to have a critical mass of researchers and scientists involved in the research field you target. The second is to increase the funding dedicated to the research field you target. And the third is to increase the collaborations globally. And that's how the idea of a joint programming for neurodegenerative research initiative is born, and is now one of the largest collaborations tackling the challenge of neurodegenerative disease with 30 countries working together. Really, the idea at the beginning was to align for a defragmentation and enhanced collaborations, to build a new type of long-term collaborations, to foster innovative approaches, to share these innovative approaches around countries, to create gateway for scientific excellence, and to get strategic platform for alignment. The principle of a joint programming relies on, the joint programming, relies on four condition of success. The first one is a common strategic research and innovation agenda. This agenda is really important. It needs to be built up first, approved by other countries, prepared by the scientific of the countries and over, and progressively implemented for a 3 or 5 years term. The second point is a shared vision. That is, the JPND countries who are signing in JPND share a common vision, they engage voluntarily, and more than that, they engage on a viable geometry. All the countries are not interested in the same topic and the same approach for neurodegenerative disease, so they can participate very specifically on one or the other point. They don't need to sign off at any calls, at any integrative activities, and so on. The third point is a light and reactive management structure. As a scientist and the physicians, I hate the administrative burden, as a lot of you around this, I hope. And the idea was to build something which was reactive, a management board, one country, one vote, a chair, a vice chair, 3 members working in an executive board elected every 2 years, and that's all. Second element, a scientific advisory board, 14 scientists, selected on merits, not on numbers, not on pressure of countries and others, really on merits, and among them 2 scientists from the industry. And with these teams, we provide a lot of things. The fourth condition of success, from my experience now, is building trust. Trust is important for all this going on. You build trust because you share the activities. The responsibility of each activities, launching calls, evaluating, and so on, are given to one country under her full responsibility. The second, excuse me, is to develop integrative activities. That is, not every country is at the same level of development. So we need working groups under the responsibility of different countries for, I don't know, for example, animal models, for cohort studies, and so on, chaired by one country with other countries, because this is a learning process to improve the evolutions of and the progress of the different countries to homogenize the levels of research within Europe. And examples, public patient involvement, which was a strong working group and very important to foster on the participation of patients, to make the scientists understand that this is important, which is not the least thing, making public aware of what's going on. And this was a very strong working group because everybody wants to have this, and I think it's a minimal way actually to do this. We have also, for instance, knowledge hubs through global portals accessible to researchers, but to the general public, database on experimental models, funded research maps, and so on. Now, what is the impact now, 12 years later? First impact is through the transnational joint national calls. To give you an idea, 250 million euros were invested, with a participation of 15 million by the commissions in 2 calls. It was only collaborative calls, that is, minimum 3 teams from 3 different countries were participating. We receive about 20 to 189 proposals per calls, and between 153 and 1,000 teams per calls applied. More than 140 projects between 1 and 8 million were funded. But now, what did these collaborations produce? I just go to the Web of Science, and we have, under the auspices of JPND, 2,500 publications, mainly in neuroscience, clinical research. Major publications published in high-level journals, 77 in the Nature collections, and an impact factor, not a citation impact, sorry, of about 100,000 citations for all this paper. If JPND were a researcher, he would have an H-index of 136. So just to give you an example, what we could now prolong in the next years. Thank you for your attention.
Philippe, you mentioned the success in cancer research. And I was, as a researcher, thinking that maybe the conditions are different. So in cancer, we have big successes. And for example, in autism, we have very little knowledge on what's going on. And in this respect, the question is, comes the main debate of science funding, and should we go researchers forward in basic science with the freedom of science, or should we rather goal direct them and ask them to deliver results? So what should be the brain health program's approach on this? Should we at all solve this debate?
I think it's both a difficult question and a rather obvious one. There is no single path to truth, as you know, very often. I think brain research is very, very different from cancer research in the way that the diversity of approach is much larger. The diversity of behavior levels to deal with is very different. So you cannot put everything in a single basket. That's not really possible. So you need both to give rooms to, as it has been said before, out-of-the-box research, innovative research, giving freedom to researchers. But at the same time, biology and neurobiology or neuroscience in general will not succeed without putting the effort together, as Philippe just said before. I think the fragmentation of effort is also something which is really preventing the progress. So we need also big initiative, as physicists has been able to do. When you build a telescope, it's the same kind of approach which we should also convey for brain research. And putting large initiative together to coordinate these efforts, because this research needs avoid duplications, needs to avoid fragmentation. Big initiative like the CSA we were presenting before is absolutely mandatory. And the two approaches should go together. It's not because you have, I would say, freedom in research that the data you gather cannot be put together to avoid this fragmentation I was speaking about. So I don't think there is any contradiction, but we really need more coordination and at the same time more freedom. I think it's the way I see it right now.
And the short answer is you need both. It's not a debate. It's really clear that it's both approaches are needed. We need the creativity of the bottom-up approach, and we need the top-down to anchor the societal needs, because we are running on taxpayers' money, and we need the buy-in of society and the citizens which are paying us basically what we are doing. And for being successful in a global competition, we need also to collaborate across borders, and that's where the European Commission comes in, because basically helping us to align the strategic national agendas and to collaborate across borders to create a European research area which is competitive enough in the global context.
Yeah, I'll probably be repeating some of the things that were said. I think Philippe was giving a couple of ideas on the condition for success. When we talk to members within EBC representing the science community, basically the surge of funding is absolutely clear. Coordination and collaboration, it was already mentioned, but also the supportive environment for basic and clinical neuroscientists to perform their work. So curiosity-driven research, academic freedom, but also making sure that we lift regulatory, administrative, or even sometimes legal barriers that are unnecessary or hindering the pace of progress in science. So the overcoming fragmentation and duplication of effort, was definitely at the basis of the European brain research area, but also building on the effort, because at the end of the day it represented our four initiatives. It was really this idea to not only work on addressing pain points, but also creating benefits there, so synergizing, fostering collaboration, and then aligning strategies. And it was the first effort to try and streamline into a strategic effort, a common agenda, paving the way to what is going to be presented later today about the thinking of a new effort and a merged effort to support research.
just a word of the recurrent debates on should it be bottom, should it be top-down. I think it should be first of high quality. And the second, it should be highly funded. Take the example of US. I'm invited at the Alzheimer's meeting in spring at the NIH. There are presentations, there are levels, but you should know that there are a lot of scientists there and a lot of money. The minimum level of funding is between 8 and 10 million euros or dollars, which is totally different from what we have in France. And there you have bottom research with out-of-the-box ideas and global aspect more directly targeted to the patients and to the family. So to summarize, I think you don't have to say it must be bottom, it must be top-down. What is top-down is a general topic you want to achieve, neurodegenerative disease, brain health. This is a top-down. Within this top-down, you need to put a lot of money and go then for bottom research with this money within this top-down approach. But what is important is the quality of research at the end anyway.
Okay, thank you. The second question is rather that what kind of organization infrastructures we need to put up for good brain health programs? I mean, organization infrastructure, I mean in an abstract way. So let's say academic publishing is an infrastructure, and boosting commercialization, and even the grant offices and the reporting structures are organizing infrastructures. How to make them so that they are actually helping the researchers and not putting a load on them and eventually preventing them from making actually science.
So this question was kind of organizational infrastructure do we need to establish these partnerships? I think only one word, the most simple one. Just to avoid various, you mean infrastructures like platform or something like that, or management? Management, yeah, I think that's it. So this is most simple management. You know, the time of the researchers and the physicians has to be dedicated to research, not to feel administrative burden. I think this is important. So whatever the choice, it must be simple.
Yeah, that's easy to say. But for example, when I got involved in an EU grant, the annotated grant agreement was 600 pages. And which is actually heavier than most of my textbooks on my curriculum. So, and I guess it has some meaning, so it was not just on purpose like that heavy.
So obviously administrative burden is painful.
Sure.
The funders networks are trying to reduce that via a two-step process. So some of these grant proposals is just a few pages. And if you imagine the funding that comes along, writing a few pages is, I would say, a reduced burden. And again, I'm making the case for the taxpayer. What we're also looking for, that the pressure on budgets is increasing. So there are other lines in societies we need to finance. So if we justify a research budget, we need to justify that via the impact we generate. And that's basically what changed in the last decade, that the pressure on demonstrate impact from what we are financing is increasing, and it will increase further. So that is the least what we have to do.
Yeah, I mean that just all of these things, like for example, boosting commercialization has a meaning. Also, communication with the public has a very good goal, but the question is how, if we can formulate that so that it doesn't go on the shoulders of the researchers.
Yeah, so that goes back to the question of infrastructure in a sense of creating platforms as you defined it before. And there I do agree. And what we would like to see, or what we try to construct already, and we would like to evolve further, is a pipeline approach, basically offering to the research community a way of bringing forward the results to the next step in the pipeline, and not always running against the next gap in the translation chain. So that's basically the offer and what we need to work hand in hand there.
Okay. Philippe?
Yes, maybe I can just give an example about this. If we speak about data, we said before there is no great opposition between bottom-up research and top-down research. Data are a good example. You know, when researchers are, you know, spending years and years in developing new approach that get absolutely valuable data, I think now the change of paradigm needs to be introduced, that this data needs not to be lost. But to do that, the way they need to be organized, the way they need to be curated, the way they need to be stored, needs to be organized through a pipeline, as you said. And this is, for example, what EBRAINS is trying to start to do now, you know, to provide the rules for putting this data together, to keep them, because this is the value of research, because then, because of the complexity of the brain, the data which have been gathered over years should be able to be reused for modeling purpose, for just building, you know, new models of diseases or brain function. This is absolutely mandatory. And for this, you need an organization. You need, you know, some kind of funneling the process to do so, and to also facilitate the way for the researchers are doing this. But for this, you need an organization indeed. It's okay. Fred.
Now, just a word about what you were alluding to, because what is a lot being discussed about is the emergence of a true European ecosystem for research and innovation in the brain space, which in a sense we feel we've got already, but needs to probably be better structured. When you talk about infrastructure, that's probably one of the ways we can interpret that word, because we're discussing also with Philippe that there can be different readings of that work. But what we see coming, and it's also part of the Commission agenda, is a greater attention in looking at the emergence of the structuring of innovation hubs. So it's probably one of the ways by which we can have a view to the entire value chain and seek at level of integration as to how research and innovation can actually feed into each other, then get to market, let's say, more rapidly. But probably a point of attention is really to make sure that the instruments we put together, and the point made by Ulrike, particularly when public investments come about, to make sure that they intervene at the right level within that value chain. That we need to have the level of collaboration and, let's say, the level of intervention at the right moment of those developments. So obviously, when we invest public money, it needs to demonstrate the right level of impact and leveraging the right level of benefits to society in, let's say, in a commensurate fashion to the burden we are trying to address. Then would probably need to come let's say, public-private partnership. Then comes, and it's a session that we will address later on, how public and patients are going to be involved into that process in order for them also to understand why these investments are necessary.
Yeah, speaking about... Yeah, yes.
Just maybe, yes, to further illustrate what Frédéric is just saying, if you speak again about data, for example, the fact that in the structural biology community, you know, they put together the protein database more than 30 years ago, first in Switzerland. They have organized, all the structural biologists agreed to put the structure together in this database. We have not to forget that if today the Google outcome, I don't remember the name of the company, was able to set up AlphaFold, which is the program which now has completely revolutionized structural biology to look at new structure. It was based on the algorithm of AI which were used to make AlphaFold, used the public database which were raised for more than 30 years. So this is a very good example of how an organization can provide a very powerful outcome in terms of innovation, in terms of scientific knowledge. So I think we have not yet the AlphaFold of the brain, but I think if we are conscious together that if putting this data together, organizing the community in the right way, putting the money at the right place, this could really be leveraging the new way of doing neuroscience. I think it's something we need to consider very deeply.
I think it's important really to have these infrastructures. The example you give is particularly if we got the Nobel Prize for that. So what's important also in terms of infrastructure is that this infrastructure have to be used by the researchers. So we need to advertise to make these infrastructures known. The experience I had in JPND is that the level of use is very, very small, and even some of them don't know that these infrastructures existed. That's the first point. The second is the researcher ask, but what will you do with my data if I put in your infrastructures? They just want to give an eyes. That's prevent them very often to put that in some infrastructure. And third, about the samples, because some infrastructure in S3 are managing samples. So I think all this trust I mentioned first is still there in the platform. But I think it's a must. You have in US a lot of platforms there, for example, for sequencing and others, which are used. The governments give money to use these platforms, and the trust because there are some rules of transfer of information. So this should be, I'm sure that S3 platforms do the same, but scientists don't know it.
There will be a panel on this just after this one, so we'll talk about this.
So, and there might be a way beyond infrastructures in the purest way of thinking to lessen the administrative burden you feel as a research community. And for example, if you are writing a grant proposal, you are now for NEURON, for example, asked to indicate how you engage with patients, how you harmonize your data, how you feed them into other platforms. This is administrative burden, what you see there. But once you get the grant, we are also helping you. So we are doing capacity building, how to build a good data management plan, how to meaningful involve and engage with patients, how to ensure that you are having fair data, to ensure quality, open science. So this is not only increasing burden, but trying to help you and support you in increasing the impact after you have finished your research project. So this is not infrastructure in a building material way, but in capacity building.
Yeah, I've seen experience of that with the Horizon Research Boosters when participated in once in my life. Now we are, Frédéric mentioned public and private, how we can better engage with the private sector, I mean, better engage with industry. So there was noted in previous discussions that industry, and especially pharmaceutical industry, is not properly represented on this meeting. However, when we are talking about making people's life better, at the end, the one company will be the one who is providing medication to the everyday people.
I think it's a key question because I think bottom-up research is very interesting, but our taxpayers just want results that they can buy at their drugstore or something like that, just to simplify a lot. In JPND, we try to do this a lot. We have working group on that, and we went through IMI at that time, then IHI, then to industry, when with NIH also we have a group there of American industry. A lot of very good discussions, everybody say, wow, it's wonderful, and then nothing. Because from my experience, if you go directly to the industry, when they come to see you and discuss, they have already a plan in their head. There's two solutions. What you say is fit with their plan. It's fine. What you say is don't fit with their plan, they don't care. And most of the time, they don't care. It's not because we are not very well interacting, but we need to better understand the plan of the industry. And then we can improve the things. On the other hand, we had a measurement of the impact of industry in JPND. And it was really strange because I was expected along these 12 years that nothing would have happened. But when we see from the point of view of researchers, we make several inquiries about researchers, the results are pretty nice. We have in all this project 8 patent applications. We have 9 patent pending examination now, which is not bad if you look to the number of teams and the number of patents that emerge from research teams in any country in Europe. You have 5 licenses granted on IP right, which is important. It's just not to deposit pattern. It's important that industry could be interested with that. And 2 license or acquired a patent owned by another organization, this industry. And you have society just like Prediagnosis, Bioventics, HUN-REN, AstraZeneca, AC, IMUDES, who collaborate and develop this pattern. So finally, the result is not that bad, but we didn't have, as JPND organization, any influence on that. It was really developed by the team. So from my point of view, okay, we need to have this interaction with IHI. Actually, for instance, in Europe, it's important to build some big consortium and others. But we need to trust the researchers. Once they have an idea, which is a bottom-up idea, they have results, they feel that it can be patented, they do it. And we have the example there. And it was no influence from the JPND management board or anybody else. It was really from the base, but it was on the money we gave, the country gave through JPND to this team that this patent emerged. So the consequence is they had patent from JPND anyway.
Want to add something?
Yesterday we talked a little bit about and discussed quality of data. So if we are talking about translation and innovation, this is a key part there. So what we need to do, and there's still quite some way to go, is to get the capacity building really at the front of innovation and to make the research community understand and help them to really hit on the industry standards so we can directly translate into the more innovation-driven consortia.
So just a reflection about the impact or let's say the concern by citizens if their taxpayers' money is badly invested. What about shareholders on the board of companies, particularly in a field that is complex, uncertain, and risky, and traditionally described as meeting lots of failures. And we now started having this type of discussion of what is the degree of patience you can have when you invest into a space. Because we saw quite often, let's say, cycles of investments almost run on a yearly basis, and if a phase 3 trial was failing, basically all of a program in a disease area was collapsing within different partners at TBC. But what we see now is definitely a change. Some call it a revolution. I don't know if that's the right word, but definitely there is a vibe of optimism and positivity, because we are now a field delivering, a field where we can showcase and celebrate successes. So let's hope it is turning on its head the storytelling and the narrative that too often has been a negative one about complexity, impossibility to find a cure. I mean, and the best could have been a symptomatic treatment, but also a very costly and burdensome area in which we need to continue to fund, but with no commitment to result.
Thank you.
No?
No. If I can speak from the perspective of the research infrastructure as such, I think they are also, of course, at the heart of this partnership between industry and research, because first, maybe the industry doesn't always realize that, in fact, when you put data in the infrastructure, they remain the property of the people who put them here. So the intellectual property remain, not the one of the infrastructure, but the one of the researcher which has put the data there or the tool there. So that's something which remains important. So in terms of patenting, there is no prevention of using the infrastructure. And also, it is something that now we are very often dealing with, is that some companies are coming to us because they would like to have access to data and tools they cannot really develop themselves, even if they inspire themselves to develop something which will be used then in their industrial framework. That's very important, especially with the notion now of twins, of virtual twins. So, of course, this is a notion which is more and more important in research, but also for drug development. And I think there is now, I would say, a win-win situation in which the researcher developing such tools can collaborate with industry to develop things which are more specifically devoted to drug development or treatment development. And there is a path to innovation here which is pretty strong. And we are, I think, in a better situation now than ever to continue this path.
Unfortunately, time is quickly passing, so we have one more quick round. What is your main message and your suggestion to the Brain Health Project as a closing word?
So as we have said before, I think the main aspect for the European community is first to, we cannot re-emphasize more than the brain disease is a major burden and that it needs to be taken at the right level. That's really the message, and for this we need we have not to reinvent the wheel. I think all the initiative which has been presented today are the way to go, and as Philippe said before, we just need, better coordination, more money, and freedom for researchers. And based on this, you can really build the future of brain research. There is no contradiction between these two aspects, and we still have a strong duty to do that toward the stakeholders and the European community. We need to inform and to learn to the politician what research is. And this is the main challenge for me. I think we need to educate not only the patients, this is done now, but mostly the policymakers which are funding this.
So for me, the main message here is that what we are planning here and preparing is a true partnership. So it's not that we will offer a buffet, but it will build on what you basically bring to the table. So it depends on all of us as actors in this ecosystem, what we bring to the table to make this a true success. And it will be a true partnership, and it will depend on all the actors in there to make it a success. Any?
It's a great teasing for your presentation later on. Yeah, just 3 things. Be ambitious, be optimistic, but also be realistic, making sure that the instruments developed have the right impact at the right level of the value chain.
I think it's really important that EP Brain Health should be a success. Because if you travel a bit, you have different blocks. You have China, you have US. The level of funding just for Alzheimer's disease last year and the year before were $1.2 billion. We cannot compete now. The only way to compete is to regroup and to defragment and to increase the money from the country, but also from the European Commissions. So we need to raise the level of fundings, and I hope that these partnerships will do this. This is one of the conditions of success. The second, and maintain the point, this should be simple and clear. Researchers are very focused, so you need for them from time to time to show the path for them where to go. So we'll be needed a large level of information through what will be delivered by the EP partnership. The third element, I think, is if we want to, and we missed this question, I think it was important, but just a word on that, not all countries are equivalent in terms of research in Europe. Some are, we should say it clearly, big countries or small countries. What we need also is to raise the level of small countries and to help them to go in the loop, because if you compare to US or China, the level is more homogeneous all over the countries. And this is very important. And finally, it's important also because this is our money, yours, mine, of every country in Europe. It's very important to involve patients, and families and general public on the objective, because the endeavor are enormous. And what is better to reduce the level of Alzheimer's disease everywhere, to improve the mental health care? So we will have to make choice. I think the researchers are not the best positions people to make this choice. So we need patient and public involvement.
Now I need to go pass the floor to the audience for questions, if you have. Please. Mike is coming from
Thank you very much for the inspiring discussion and a lot of food for thoughts. And so you were speaking about the impact. You gave example on the impact of some of these collaborative efforts. So can you mention in terms of patient engagement what you can provide to show that also this initiative provide impact on patient and how?
We have some topics who are really dedicated to patient. We have some topics who are really dedicated to patients. Among these, and they measure the impact of the patient. So refer to our website and you will see these activities where they modify the level of care. We have fingers, perhaps you know these studies who just try to stimulate people just to improve their level of cognitive function. So we have this. But what I think is, in terms, as a coordination, what's important is to make patients and public aware of what happens. So the idea is to make an acculturation of the researchers to deliver their information clearly to the public, which is very important, and to the patients. Second is to introduce the patients and the carers in the group of reflections, in the scientific advisory board and so on. Because the choice I mentioned within all these challenges is important. We have to take the point of view of the public to make this choice. And so this is the two major line of implications that this type of coordination may have, from my point of view.
So can I just ask another question about industry collaboration? So having put in many EU grants and been successful in a small proportion of them, I know that the SME story is asked for and we do engage with them. But it seems to me a missed opportunity that the large pharma industries in Europe, which are very rich and are doing very important work in developing new treatments, aren't integrated more into this process. And maybe one thing that we need to do is perhaps to have a special meeting where they are the audience, and we invite big pharma to come along, small pharma as well, but also diagnostic industries, neuroimaging, the whole panoply of industry in biomedical sphere. And we present to them this vision that we have this amount of money, and it can make much more if there is an engagement with industry. We're not asking them to do competitive research, but pre-competitive research, and asking them to come along and invest in this process for common good. And I don't know whether that is something that is possible, which has been tried and they've agreed, not engaged with it. It would be useful to just think about that a bit more, because I'm conscious of the fact that if you look at something like ADNI in the US, there's a huge industry collaboration there. And we are playing catch up a little bit. So finding a way to get to the root of the problem at a much earlier stage, pre-competitive research, may be one route into the process.
So thanks a lot for that contribution. That's basically what we will do. We will talk about that later after lunch, what are the plans for the future. But you will get presented the research and innovation agenda by our French partner. And that was also built by, with a dialogue with the industry, with the private sector. And this is a big pharma SMEs, but it's also really startups, really very tiny ones. It might be services in the AI sector, it's really private sector. It's not only big pharma looking for treatments, but it's the entire range of private sector actors there. And one of the things is having that dialogue, and as I said before, is having capacity building on the academic side, but also to understand what are the industry needs and try to make them engage at an earlier time point. And that doesn't have to be necessarily funding. It can also be mentoring, it can be training, it can be joint training programs. So there's a lot more to do than what we did so far, and that's part of the scope of the future activities.
Yeah, cannot agree more with what you said, David. Just a point is maybe we have this tendency of looking at things in silo and thinking that the industry or the public-private partnership is being dealt with formally in IMI and now with IHI, so that box is ticked. Whilst we probably, and we have the demonstration that in our space, a greater degree of integration and, let's say, focused discussions on neuroscience and brain research, brain innovation is necessary. Colleagues have been teasing about their panels later on, so I'll be teasing about an EBC activity which is called the Brain Innovation Days. So since a couple of years we have now gathered every year like all the tiers of the innovation ecosystem in the brain space for a meeting, but also for engagement, for discussions, for showcasing successes, but also addressing common challenges. So we'd like to push it really further, but obviously, industry partners are part of our membership and our partnership, so they are invited, but we also have innovators and young researchers, for instance, and SMEs coming as well.
So that sounds fantastic. The only other suggestion I would make is to get researchers from the different fields perhaps to be involved in that engagement with the industry. So when you have that meeting with industry, perhaps get people from neurodegeneration, from traumatic brain injury, from autism, from psychiatric disease, to come and say, this is the offering from an academic base, but also the basic scientists that we heard from yesterday to make sure that they understand what's available. So making that offering available, this is the capital we're putting in, and we want to know what you want to make of it.
If I may just a comment on that. We had that discussions in JPND a lot, and the conclusions about the big industry is to work with IMI and IHI. There we had some discussions with people, because we have a neurodegenerative line specific there, and I think it was more productive to do this than having our own meetings. The point remained for SMEs, because SMEs and startups are very important in that development, because a lot of researchers are in these SMEs, basic researchers that know well JPND. We tried to do this, but the main hurdle we had was the government, because the government put money in JPND, which from Ministry of Research or Ministry of Health. And this type of funding comes from Minister of Economy or Finance, so the investment in industry. So we try to launch this, but we're not able to convince enough countries, their Ministry of Economy, to put money on the table to be able to fund projects with SMEs and researchers. So if we can solve this problem, this could be an open door for the SMEs.
Well, I know time is running, but on that, there is a fantastic experience in Denmark. So they have a project funded by the government, which is called the Lighthouse Life Science. And it's basically using the industry infrastructure of the country, because they have a tradition of public-private partnership that is probably more advanced than other countries. And, well, to name them, Novo Nordisk and Lundbeck were mandated by the government in turn to work and run an incubator for startups and small SMEs to develop solutions that they would then design in the framework of terms of reference they would build themselves, but to make sure that the solution being generated by those startups is directly implementable and usable in that industry ecosystem. So it is basically bringing patients on board as well as basic scientists, etc. But it's being run in that space where it is directly, let's say, being fed into concrete solutions rather than to work in isolation, then not hitting to the market and then having to go through regulatory hurdles and whatever. So we are hoping to see that, let's say, better known about in the context of the Danish presidency of the EU, but that's definitely a model that we can invite to our next meeting.
Maybe one last question? Up there.
Jens Habermann, BMI Eric. You talked about the fragmentation and the competitiveness according and compared to US, for instance, or China. How do you ensure to engage all the different stakeholder groups for brain health research in the future to build up on what is already there, be cost efficient, and so on? Because I think this is a major challenge in this fragmented ecosystem in Europe. Thank you.
This is the most difficult question, honestly. Again, I will talk about that later after lunch, but the offer there is to create a platform and to facilitate that engagement. And we have great building blocks with JPND and NEURON. These are long-running networks and a lot of engagement in a broad scope. We bring that together and build on that, broaden the scope, be it on the funders as well as on the stakeholder side. So we will engage also with innovation funders, referring to the previous question, and facilitate that kind of dialogue. But it will take time. So the expectations are high, so it will not be the first year that we will reach that, but we will build it over time, and we have time. The unique opportunity here is that it's the first time we have the possibility to build a network over several years, because the funding cycle will be up to 10 years, and that's the first time we have this opportunity. And it's also unique in the landscape of partnerships because it's the first and only one which is concentrating on an organ. So yes, it's a great and very broad scope, but it's the first time that we can bring these actors together, and that's basically what we will do.
Anybody to add?
Well, I mean, just to share the experience that we had in EBRA, we started and we initiated a group that we called clusters in different fields. You had representatives of most of them in yesterday afternoon showcasing. So it was ranging from epilepsy, trisomy 21, preclinical models, imaging biomarkers. So quite a few were then selected. But we're, let's say, paving the way to what you were describing in them building the consensus or identifying their needs in terms of access to resources, infrastructure, and all the rest of it. So we hope that from their experience we can learn and then feed into the next effort in the partnership.
Thank you. Unfortunately, our time is running up. So thank you all for sharing your thoughts with us. And thank you, everybody, for being with us today. Thank you.